I, a 21-year-old male, lost my mom in a car wreck when I was 8. On a normal Tuesday, she went to the store and never came back. Dad, a 44-year-old male, and I managed on our own for about 2 years, bachelor pad style, with lots of pizza and frozen dinners, but we were doing okay. Then Valeria, a 41-year-old female, entered the picture. Dad met her at some work function and was basically obsessed from day one. She was all smiles and fake sweetness, which my dad fell for. Valeria brought her son Liam, a 21-year-old male, with her, the same age as me, and from day one, it was clear who the real son was in her eyes. Dad was too busy running his business to notice how things changed when he wasn't home. Our house had always been my safe place, but after they moved in, it became enemy territory. The first time I realized how bad it was going to be was about 2 weeks after they moved in. Valeria rearranged the entire house, including my room. She threw out a bunch of my stuff without asking, including this old baseball my mom and I had caught at a game. When I got upset, she told me I was being dramatic and that I needed to make room for the family. Dad just shrugged it off when I told him. "She's just trying to make the place nice, buddy," he said. Liam was a sneaky little prick from the beginning. When we were 12, he broke Dad's expensive watch, then planted it in my backpack. Valeria found it during one of her random searches of my room. Yeah, she did that regularly. Dad grounded me for a month while Liam smirked behind his back. That became the pattern. Liam would pull something, blame me, and Valeria would back him up. Dad, wanting to keep his new wife happy, usually sided with them. By high school, Liam had mastered the art of making my life hell. He'd steal money from Valeria's purse, then suddenly my wallet would have an extra 20 in it. He'd fail a test, then somehow my backpack would have a crumpled copy of the answer key. Every time I tried to explain, Dad would just look disappointed and say, "I don't want to hear you blaming your brother again, like I was the problem." And every time I tried defending myself, I'd somehow end up grounded. Of course, it was an unfair 2 versus 1. The worst part wasn't the punishments, it was watching my dad slowly stop believing in me. The man who taught me to always tell the truth now looked at me like I was a pathological liar. The guy who used to call me his best buddy started treating me like I was just some problem he had to manage. Valeria controlled the finances, the house, everything. Dad handed over his paycheck like a good little soldier, and she managed it all. Anytime I needed something for school or whatever, I had to go through her, which meant getting interrogated about why I needed it and usually being told no. Meanwhile, Liam would get $100 to go to the mall with his friends without even having to ask. When college applications came around, Liam got a private tutor to help with his essays and SAT prep. I had to figure that out on my own. He got into state with a mediocre GPA, and Valeria threw this massive party. I got into a better school with a partial scholarship, and they barely acknowledged it. I couldn't afford to go anyway, since Valeria had made it clear they wouldn't be contributing to my education. "College isn't for everyone," she'd say. "Maybe you should consider trade school instead." Nothing wrong with trades, but this was clearly her way of saying I wasn't worth investing in. Despite all that, I managed to graduate with decent grades and get into community college. I stayed at home to save money, working part-time at a local hardware store. I kept my head down, avoided Liam when possible, and counted the days until I could afford to move out. Just one more year of saving, that's all I needed, but they had other plans for me. See, Liam was failing out of state. He'd spent his first year partying instead of studying, and now he was on academic probation. Valeria was freaking out because she'd bragged to all her friends about her genius son at college. Dad was stressed about money because his business was going through a rough patch. And there I was, working steadily, taking classes, building a little savings account. The tension in the house was getting worse. Liam was home more often, picking fights with me over stupid things. Valeria was drinking more, slamming doors and snapping at everyone. Dad was working longer hours, probably to avoid coming home. It was like living in a powder keg. The day everything went to hell started like any other. I had morning classes, then a shift at the hardware store, then was planning to study at the library with my buddy Jake. Dad had been extra stressed about some business expansion he was planning, and Valeria was being even more of a pain in the ass than usual. Liam had been suspiciously quiet for about a week. He was never quiet unless he was plotting something. I got home from my shift around 6 p.m. to complete chaos. The second I walked through the door, I knew something was seriously wrong. Dad's face was red. He looked like he might actually have a stroke. Valeria was screaming into her phone at someone, and there was Liam, sitting on the couch with this weird, calm expression that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Dad spotted me and practically lunged across the room. He grabbed my shoulders hard enough to leave bruises, getting right in my face. "Where is it?" he demanded. I had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. "Where's what?" I asked, trying to step back. Valeria hung up her call and started yelling about how $50,000 in cash was missing from Dad's office safe. Apparently, he kept emergency money there for the business. Stupid, I know, but he's old school like that, and had been planning to use some of it for the expansion. Now it was gone, and somehow they decided I was the one who took it. That's when Liam spoke up, all calm and concerned, saying he'd seen me messing with Dad's safe the day before. His voice had that fake sincerity that made me want to punch him in the face. The thing is, I hadn't even been home much the previous day. I was at the library with Jake all afternoon and evening, working on a project. But Liam had thought of everything. He said I could have easily gone into the office before leaving for the library, doing that in air quotes. Dad's office was always locked, and only he had the key, or so I thought. When I pointed this out, Valeria jumped in with, "We found the spare key in your desk drawer, a key I'd never seen before in my life, but of course they'd found it in my room. How convenient." Valeria was already tearing through my room like a tornado, ripping through my drawers and closet. "You better tell us where it is," she kept screaming while Dad just stood there, eating me with his eyes. She found a receipt for a storage unit in my jacket pocket, a jacket I hadn't worn in weeks. Dad's face just kept getting darker as she waved it around like she'd discovered the murder weapon or something. I tried calling Jake to back up my story about being at the library, but of course, he wasn't answering. That would have been too convenient. I was starting to panic, realizing how perfectly I'd been set up. It was all too coordinated to be anything but a frame job. "I didn't take anything," I kept saying, getting more desperate as I watched my dad believe their lies. "Why would I steal from you? Check my bank account. I don't have the money." Valeria twisted that too, as if he'd keep it in his account. "He's not that stupid, Mark. That's why he has the storage unit." She was smirking now, enjoying watching me squirm. Liam was still pretending to look concerned, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. Jake finally called back around 11 p.m. and confirmed I was with him studying, but Valeria immediately painted him as my accomplice. Of course his friend would lie for him, she told my dad, who just nodded along like this made perfect sense, because clearly my plan to steal $50,000 would include bringing a witness who could place me away from the scene of the crime. Brilliant detective work there. I kept running through options in my head, trying to figure out how to prove I didn't do it. But Liam had been planning this for a while, probably from the moment he realized he was failing out of college. Then Dad suddenly stood, looking at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into his house, not his son, not someone he'd raised, just some criminal he wanted gone. "Pack your things. I can't have a thief living under my roof," he said in this cold, emotionless voice, like he was talking about taking out the trash, not kicking out his own kid. I tried one more time to make him believe me. "Dad, please, I didn't take the money. Liam is setting me up. He's always trying to get me in trouble. You know that. How can you believe him and not your own son?" He cut me off with a sharp gesture, always blaming Liam. "That's your problem. You never take responsibility for your actions. I've put up with the lying, the attitude, but stealing from me, that's it. I'm done." Valeria was hovering behind him, looking satisfied. Liam watched, not even trying to hide his smirk anymore. "He won. You've got until tonight to return the money," Dad said. "Otherwise, don't come back." I looked at him, trying to find any trace of the man who used to take me fishing, who taught me to ride a bike, who held me when I cried after Mom died. There was nothing, just this cold, angry stranger wearing my dad's face, so I packed. What else could I do? I stuffed some clothes in my backpack, grabbed my laptop and some other stuff, and the one photo of my mom I kept by my bed. I didn't have much cash, maybe $60 total, no car, nowhere to go, and my own father thought I was a thief. As I walked toward the front door, Liam stepped into my path. "Sucks to be you," he whispered, just low enough that Dad and Valeria couldn't hear. "Maybe you should have been nicer to me." That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about creating a distraction from his college failure. This was payback for every time I'd stood up to him, every time I'd called him out, every time I'd refused to be his doormat. I shouldered past him and walked out of the house without looking back. I stood at the end of the driveway, watching the only home I'd ever known grow smaller as I walked away. 19 years old, basically homeless, with my entire future derailed by a lie I couldn't disprove. I should have seen it coming. I should have moved out sooner. I should have realized that in this house I was never going to win. But standing there in the street all alone, I made myself a promise. This wasn't the end of my story, not by a long shot. The first night after getting kicked out was a real eye-opener. Nothing like being suddenly homeless to make you realize how much you've taken for granted. Basics like having a bed, a shower, or knowing where your next meal is coming from suddenly become your whole focus. I spent that first night on a bench at the park near campus. It was March, still pretty cold at night, and I kept waking up shivering. My backpack made for a shitty pillow. and I had to keep one arm looped through the strap so nobody would steal it while I slept. Every noise woke me up, people walking by, cars on the street, some raccoons staring into my soul. By morning, I was exhausted, stiff, and feeling like complete hell. First thing I did was try calling Dad, thinking maybe he'd calm down overnight. Straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Dad, please, can we talk about this?" All I got back was, "Return the money or else. Don't call." So this wasn't some 24-hour punishment that would blow over. I was actually on my own. I couldn't go to campus looking like I'd slept in a park, no shower, same clothes as yesterday, probably smelled like ass. I tried washing my hair in a gas station bathroom, but the attendant caught me and kicked me out, called me a bum, and threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Liam, "How's the streets?" and "Should have been smart, bro, and Dad's trashing your stuff today." Each one felt like a punch to the gut. I had $47 in my bank account, no place to sleep, and my own father thought I was a thief, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to prove otherwise. The worst part was walking around campus that day, watching everyone go about their normal lives while mine had completely imploded. I sat in the library all day, just to be somewhere warm, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. When the library closed, I tried sleeping in a 24-hour McDonald's, buying the cheapest thing on the menu so they wouldn't kick me out. That worked for a few hours until a manager noticed me nodding off and told me to leave. Then I tried in the stairwell of a parking garage, even worse than the park bench. Concrete is not meant for sleeping. Finally, I got hold of Jake. We weren't super close friends or anything, more like study buddies, but he was a decent guy. I tried to keep it casual, just said I was having family issues and needed a place to stay for a few days. He must have heard something in my voice because he didn't ask many questions, just said I could come over. His parents were the kind of people who actually give a damn about others. When I showed up, looking like death warmed over, they didn't freak out or get all judgmental. His mom just made up the couch with sheets and a pillow. His dad asked if I'd eaten. They were cool, they didn't push for details, just said I could stay until things settled down. I almost lost it right there in their living room, just from basic human kindness after days of feeling like the world's biggest outcast. That night, showered and with a full stomach for the first time in days, I broke down and told Jake everything, how Liam had framed me, how Dad had chosen to believe him without evidence, how Valeria had practically danced with joy as I was thrown out. He actually listened to me, which felt like a miracle at that point. I had to drop out of college. There was no way to focus on classes when I was trying to figure out where I'd be sleeping in a week. Plus, I couldn't afford tuition now that Dad had cut me off. Another win for Liam. He'd not only gotten me kicked out of the house, but also derailed my education. Finding work was a nightmare. Every application asked for an address, and my friend's couch wasn't exactly inspiring to employers. I finally got hired at a warehouse, loading trucks on the night shift, the kind of job where they don't ask too many questions as long as you can lift heavy stuff and show up on time. The pay was garbage, but it was a good beginning. Jake's parents were saints, but I could tell they were wondering how long this arrangement would last. 2 weeks in, I overheard his dad asking how long I was planning to stay, not in a mean way, just concerned. That night, I counted my warehouse paychecks and realized I had just enough for a security deposit on the absolute shittiest studio apartment in town. The place was a complete dump, roaches everywhere, a shower that alternated between freezing and scalding with no warning, and the whole building smelled like the Chinese restaurant on the first floor. But at least it was mine, and nobody could kick me out as long as I paid rent. Moving in was depressing as hell. All my stuff fit in 2 garbage bags. No furniture except a used mattress I got for $15 from some guy on Craigslist. The first night there, I sat on that half-inflated mattress, eating cold ramen, no microwave, and just lost it. Cried like a little kid. 20 years old, and my life was already beyond recognition. The warehouse job was killing me, 12-hour shifts of heavy lifting, supervisors, minimum wage. My back hurt constantly, my hands were always cut up, and I was so tired most days that I'd just come home and pass out on my air mattress without even eating. But I kept showing up because the alternative was worse. I know it sounds petty, but I kept trying to reach Dad those first few weeks. I was refusing the idea that he could do this to me, but eventually, he stopped responding at all. I drove by the house one more time and saw they'd installed a security camera pointing at the driveway. Message received. The hardest thing was accepting that my dad really believed I was capable of stealing from him. After everything we'd been through together, after raising me on his own for years after Mom died, he still chose to believe Liam's lies. That, more than being homeless, more than sleeping on an air mattress with roaches crawling over me, more than anything, it left a scar that probably won't heal over time. Jake was the only person who stuck by me. He'd come over sometimes, bringing leftover food from his mom or just hanging out in my sad little apartment. He never made me feel pathetic, even though we both knew I was at rock bottom. That kind of friendship is rare. The kind where someone sees you at your absolute worst and still chooses to be there. That's how I knew he was a real one. About 3 months in, things got even worse. The warehouse cut back hours, so my already tiny paycheck got even smaller. The building where I lived had a water leak that the landlord refused to fix, so my ceiling was growing black mold. And to top it all off, I got mugged walking home from work one night, lost my last $20, and ended up with a black eye and busted lip. I seriously considered giving up, not in a dramatic end-it-all kind of way, but more like just accepting that this was my life now and it wasn't going to get better. Maybe I'd always be the guy living paycheck to paycheck in a roach-infested apartment, working jobs that treated me like I was disposable. There's this weird clarity that comes when you hit absolute bottom. When you've lost everything, you realize you've got nothing left to lose, and in a weird way, that's freeing. I'd been raised to think success meant college, career, house in the suburbs, all that conventional stuff. But now that path was closed to me. So what was I supposed to do? I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment and thinking, well, this is it. This is as bad as it gets, so the only direction from here is up. And that's when Jake showed up with a 6-pack of sodas and an idea that would change everything. That night, Jake showed up at my hole of an apartment. He had an actual plan. We were sitting on my floor, still no furniture besides that sad air mattress, when he pulled out his laptop and started showing me these designs he'd been working on. I've been creating these custom gaming controllers and skins, he explained, flipping through images of some seriously cool-looking designs. People online will pay good money for this stuff, but I don't know how to set up a website or handle orders and shipping and all that business crap. I didn't get what this had to do with me until he said, "You've always been good with computers and organization. What if we partnered up, start small, see what happens?" My first reaction was to laugh in his face. Here I was, working a job that barely covered rent, and he thought I had the bandwidth to start a business? But Jake wasn't joking. He actually thought this could work. "Look, what else are you going to do?" he asked when I didn't respond. "Keep killing yourself at that warehouse job until your back gives out? This could be something, man." He wasn't wrong about the warehouse. My supervisor was a complete jerk who seemed to enjoy assigning me the heaviest loads, and at 20, I already had the back of a 50-year-old construction worker. I was going nowhere fast, so I said, why not? What did I have to lose? We started with absolutely nothing. Built a basic website using free tools, invested what little we had in materials, $200. From my side, mostly money I should have spent on food, and worked on filling orders at night after our day jobs. The first month, we made $87 total, split 2 ways. It wasn't even enough to buy decent groceries, but weirdly, having a project to focus on made everything else more bearable. The warehouse job still sucked, but it wasn't my whole life anymore. My apartment was still a dump, but I spent less time there because I was at Jake's, working on controllers. For the first time since getting kicked out, I had something to think about besides how much my life sucked. The second month, we made $212. The third, almost $400. By month 4, we were getting consistent orders, mostly through word of mouth. Turned out Jake's designs were actually pretty damn good, and my obsessive attention to detail, thanks for that one, Dad, meant our quality was solid. We started getting repeat customers, which in a niche business like custom controllers is basically the holy grail. Around month 5, we caught our first real break. Jake had been sending free samples to gaming YouTubers, basically begging them to check out our stuff. Most ignored us, but this one guy with about 100,000 subscribers actually featured one of our controllers in a video. Orders jumped overnight. We went from maybe 5 to 10 orders a week to over 40. Suddenly, we were scrambling to keep up. I cut back on warehouse hours to focus more on the business, which was scary as hell. That steady paycheck, shitty as it was, had been my safety net, but the gamble paid off. By month 6, we were making enough from the controllers that I could finally quit the warehouse completely. We moved operations from Jake's parents' garage to a tiny rented workspace, basically a storage unit with electricity, but it was a step up. We started buying materials in bulk to save money, created an actual system for tracking orders instead of the mess of spreadsheets we'd been using. Real business. Month 7, we hired our first part-time employee, a community college kid who needed flexible hours. Month 8, I finally moved out of Roach Central into a decent 1-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but clean, functional, and with neighbors who didn't cook meth in the unit below. I bought actual furniture, a real bed, a desk for my computer, small stuff that most people take for granted, but to me, it felt like winning the lottery. The business kept growing. By month 10, we had 3 part-time employees and were looking for a bigger workspace. We expanded beyond just controllers into custom PC builds, which had bigger profit margins, Jake was handling all the design and creative stuff while I managed the finances, customer service, and logistics. Turns out I had a head for business that I never knew about. It wasn't all smooth sailing. We had supply chain issues, customer complaints, and an employee who tried to steal from us. Normal business problems. But compared to being homeless, these were problems I could actually solve. The 1-year mark from getting kicked out came and went. I was in a completely different place than I ever expected to be. Our little side hustle had become a legitimate business with an actual office, employees, and monthly revenue that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. I had moved again, this time to a nice 2-bedroom apartment in a good part of town. The hardest part of all this success was letting go of the anger. Every time something good happened with the business, part of me wanted to rub it in my dad's face. Look what I did without you. Look what you missed by choosing Liam over me. But I never reached out. That bridge was burned. Then, almost 18 months after I'd been kicked out, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in a long time. It was Dad. I was in the middle of a meeting with Jake and our employees, discussing a potential partnership with a gaming accessory company that wanted to carry our products, when I saw the caller ID. I actually froze mid-sentence. Jake noticed and asked if everything was okay. "It's my dad," I said, staring at the phone like it might explode. Jake made some excuse about needing to check inventory, clearing the room so I could take the call privately. I let the phone ring a few more times, debating whether to answer or let it go to voicemail. I wanted to ignore it, to make him feel what I'd felt when he wouldn't take my calls, but I really wanted to know why he was calling after all this time. "Hello," I kept my voice neutral, like I was taking a call from a stranger. His voice sounded rough. "Son, I need to see you. It's important." I almost laughed. Now it was important, after a 1.5 years of silence. When I asked why, he told me he couldn't do it over the phone, then he begged me to meet. His tone made me really curious, so we agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown the next day. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with possibilities. Had he finally figured out the truth? Was he sick? Was this some kind of trap? Why did he call after all this time? Walking into that coffee shop was surreal. I spotted him immediately, looking like he'd aged a decade. The strong, confident man I'd known was gone. This guy looked beaten down, exhausted. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down across from him. He stared at me for a long moment. "You look good, son. Different." I didn't reply, just waited for whatever bomb he was about to drop. He took a deep breath. "Okay, let me tell you. Valeria is gone. She left 6 weeks ago. Not what I was expecting. Gone where? I found out she was cheating on me for years," he said, bitterly laughing, "and she's been stealing from me, from the business, tens of thousands over the years. She cleaned out our accounts before she fled." I kept quiet, letting him continue. "She left with her yoga instructor," he added, "and Liam went with her at first, but they had some kind of falling out. He's been calling, asking for money." He trailed off, and I prompted. I needed to hear him say it. Dad's eyes filled with tears, and I was wrong about everything. When they left, I found evidence. Liam had texted Valeria about how they'd set you up, how they'd taken the money together. He even admitted it in a text to me later, throwing it in my face that he'd framed you, called me an idiot for believing him. He was right. I was an idiot. I chose them over my own son. There it was, vindication after all this time. My dad finally knew the truth, but instead of feeling satisfied, I just felt tired. "So what do you want from me?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "I need help," he admitted, looking down at his coffee. "I've lost everything. The business is struggling. The house is going into foreclosure. Valeria took everything she could get her hands on before she left." "Where are you staying?" I asked. "Motel 6 off the highway. That's all I can afford right now." The irony wasn't lost on me. A 1.5 years ago, I'd been the one with nowhere to go. Now our positions were reversed. "You're my son," he said, mistaking my silence for consideration. "We're family, real family, blood, not like Valeria and Liam." I couldn't help but laugh. "You kicked me out with nothing. You chose them over me without a second thought. You didn't even try to hear my side. I know I failed you. I've been thinking about your mother, what she would say about how I—" Something in me snapped at the mention of my mom. "Don't bring her into this! You don't get to use her memory to manipulate me. You tossed me aside, ghosted me when I needed you the most, didn't even try to know if I was alive or not, and now you're expecting me to forget everything and play happy family like nothing happened?" "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I really am, son. Please, I need help. The house is going to be gone soon. I've got nowhere to go. I'm asking for another chance. I promise I'll make everything up to you." I stared at this man, my father, who I'd once idolized, who I desperately wanted approval from for years. Now he was asking me for help after he'd thrown me away like garbage. You can't make anything up. The damage is done, and honestly, I'm good on my own. After 1 minute of awkward silence that followed, I asked, "How does it feel to have nowhere to go, to be desperate? to have your life destroyed by someone else's actions. His face crumpled. I deserve that. Yeah, I nodded. You do. We sat in silence for a long moment. Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell, to feel the same abandonment he'd made me feel. But then I remembered the man he was before this whole Valeria and Liam mess ruined our lives, the man I'd loved for most of my life. I'll think about it, I finally said, standing up to leave. That's all I can offer right now. He looked up at me, hope and desperation fighting for control of his face. I understand, he said. I was feeling strangely empty. The vindication I'd expected to feel was nowhere to be found, just a hollow recognition that the man I once thought was invincible was just as fallible, just as broken as anyone else. And now he wanted me to save him. The irony was almost too perfect, but as I drove back to the office I realized I had a choice to make. I could turn my back on him like he turned his back on me, or I could be the bigger person. I still didn't know which I would choose, but for the first time in a long time, the choice was entirely mine to make. Seriously, so buckle up and grab your snacks. It's been about 5 months since that coffee shop meeting with my dad, and I'm still processing everything that's happened since then. First off, I did end up helping my dad, but not in the way he asked. I couldn't let him move in with me, that would have been too much after everything. Instead, I gave him enough money for a security deposit on an apartment and helped him get a job at the warehouse I worked in. Basic work, nothing glamorous but steady income. He took it without complaint. We didn't talk much about the past, it was easier to focus on the present. But I could tell he was watching me, seeing what I'd built from nothing, and I think it was slowly sinking in just how badly he'd misjudged me. Sometimes after work, we'd grab dinner, awkward at first, lots of long silences, but gradually we started talking about real stuff. But let me tell you, sometimes karma takes its sweet time, but when it finally shows up, it doesn't mess around. So about 2 weeks ago, Dad got a call that left him white as a sheet. I was in my office when he knocked on the door, his hands shaking so bad he could barely hold his phone. It's the police, he said, in Phoenix, Arizona. They've arrested Valeria, and Liam. Turns out after leaving my dad, Valeria and Liam had moved to Phoenix and tried to pull the same scam on Valeria's new boyfriend. They stole money from his safe, but this time, they got caught. The boyfriend had installed security cameras after noticing money missing previously. The cops found Valeria's fingerprints all over the safe, and when they searched her car, they found a bag with the stolen cash, along with fake IDs and multiple credit cards in different names. Liam was with her when they got pulled over, and he immediately started trying to pin everything on her. Some things never change. When the police ran their names, they found out Valeria had a history of similar scams in other states before she met my dad. She'd pull the same basic con, date a successful guy with kids, slowly take control of the finances, then clean him out. Liam was her accomplice in the more recent jobs. They found a storage unit, Dad told me, his voice breaking, with stuff from our house, including your mother's jewelry that went missing years ago. That hit me like a truck. I'd been accused of stealing my dead mother's jewelry. That was a new low. I hadn't even known about it. Valeria had told Dad I must have sold it for drug money, and he'd believed her. Just another lie in a long string of lies. The cops wanted both of us to come to Arizona to give statements about our experiences with Valeria and Liam. When we arrived in Phoenix, the detective showed us photos of the evidence they'd recovered, including my mom's jewelry and police evidence bags. Dad couldn't even look at the pictures. They also showed us surveillance footage from the latest victim's house, clear as day, Valeria opening the safe while Liam kept watch. The detective told us Liam had flipped on Valeria immediately, trying to save his own skin by blaming everything on her. He's giving us details on every scam they've pulled together, the detective said, including how they set you up with the missing $50,000. According to Liam's statement, he and Valeria had been planning to clean out Dad's accounts for months. The $50,000 from the safe was just the beginning. They needed me gone because I was asking too many questions about the finances and getting in the way, so they came up with the perfect plan to get rid of me while also testing whether Dad would choose Valeria over his own son. 2 birds, 1 stone. On the flight back home, Dad finally broke down completely, right there in a crowded flight. This man, who I'd never seen cry, completely lost it. I failed you. I failed your mother. She made me promise to always protect you, to always believe in you, and I broke that promise. I didn't know what to say. I was still angry, will probably always be angry, but what I saw was a broken man who'd lost everything and was trying to make amends the only way he knew how. When we landed, I made a decision that surprised even me. I told Dad he could stay with me for a while in my spare room, not permanently, but until he figures out next steps. It's been a week now, and it's awkward as hell, but we're trying. The business is doing better than ever. Jake and I are talking about opening a second location, maybe even developing our own line of gaming accessories. I've got 6 full-time employees now, and we just signed a deal with an online retailer to carry our products. As for Valeria and Liam, they're both facing serious charges. The prosecutor says with all the evidence they have, including Liam's testimony against Valeria, it's basically a slam-dunk case. Dad's been subpoenaed to testify at their trial next month. Sometimes I think about how different my life would be if Liam had never framed me, if I'd never been kicked out. I probably would have finished community college, gotten some ordinary job, and continued living in my dad's shadow. In some weird way, getting kicked out was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to build something of my own. Me and Dad, well, we're taking it day by day. He's still working in the warehouse, still staying in my spare room. Sometimes we talk about Mom, about the good days, and sometimes we sit in silence, both aware of all the years we lost that we can never get back. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him. Trust is like glass. Once it's shattered, you can glue it back together, but it'll never be as strong as it was. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever imagined I would be at 22. I own a successful business, have a nice apartment, even started seeing someone recently who seems pretty cool. The best part? Every morning when I walk into that office, the employees all greet me with respect, and every time my dad sees it, I can tell he's thinking about what he almost lost forever. To the people thought I should completely cut my dad off. I get where you're coming from, believe me, but it's more complicated than that. He messed up massively, no argument there. But Valeria was manipulating him for years, not making excuses for him, just saying there's context. We're taking it one day at a time.